Doreen Herbert was born on November 29, 1952, in California and grew up in a large household with 4 siblings. She was known as a kind, optimistic person who was always eager to help others. From her school years, she had already decided to build a career that allowed her to assist people. After completing her studies, she moved to San Francisco and began working as a physiotherapist. Alongside her professional ambitions, Doreen dreamed of creating a big family of her own, and soon the chance arose. At the age of 24, she met Michael Dennis, who worked at a factory close to her clinic. The two quickly grew close, began dating, and within a few months decided to marry. In 1976, they welcomed their son, Paul. At first, the couple was happy, but after the birth of their child, their relationship started to weaken. Within a year, they chose to divorce. Paul remained in Doreen's care, while Michael was allowed regular visits. Despite their separation, they managed to maintain a civil relationship. A year later, Doreen met another man named Charles. Their relationship progressed quickly, leading to marriage and a move to San Jose, where they settled in a calm residential neighborhood. In 1979, their daughter Diana was born. Charles, much like his wife, longed for a large family. He lovingly took on the role of raising Paul as his own and was overjoyed when their daughter arrived. However, tragedy struck in February 1980. 4-year-old Paul managed to climb over the fence surrounding the family's pool and fell into the water. Doreen, who was at home, noticed too late. She pulled her son out of the pool and immediately called an ambulance. He was rushed to the hospital and placed on life support. After 10 days, doctors determined there was no hope of recovery and made the decision to disconnect him from the machines. The loss devastated Doreen, leaving her heartbroken and consumed with guilt, even though the police investigation confirmed she was not at fault. Despite the overwhelming pain, she carried on with life, and caring for her young daughter helped her endure the grief. For years after this heartbreaking loss, the family was finally met with some joy. Doreen and Charles had long been trying for another child, though her previous 2 pregnancies had ended prematurely. Eventually, Doreen became pregnant again, and this time, everything progressed smoothly. They were expecting a baby boy in early November. Just days before Doreen was due to give birth, the family decided to take part in Halloween festivities. On the night of October 31st, the neighborhood was full of decorated houses, children trick-or-treating, and families sharing candies. Diana, who was 4 years old, insisted on joining the celebrations, and her parents agreed. Even though Doreen was 9 months pregnant, she accompanied her daughter while Charles stayed home, handing out sweets to other children. The mother and daughter returned just before 9 p.m. Charles mentioned that their candy supply was nearly gone and decided to make a quick trip to the store so as not to disappoint the local kids. He left around 8:50 p.m. and returned about 15 minutes later. As he approached, he noticed the front door slightly open, which immediately struck him as unusual. Stepping inside, Charles was confronted with a horrifying scene. His wife was lying in the hallway, surrounded by a large pool of blood, showing no signs of life. In shock, he called 911. Soon after, he discovered the lifeless body of their unborn baby in the living room. Overwhelmed and unable to process what he was seeing, Charles briefly thought his wife might have suffered a miscarriage, but he quickly realized the truth was far worse. Next to the baby lay a severed human hand, which he recognized as Doreen's. Horrified, he understood that someone had brutally attacked his family. In panic, he rushed to search for Diana, terrified that his daughter might also have been harmed. The floor was so drenched in blood that Charles slipped and fell as he frantically moved through the house. Thankfully, Diana was alive. She had been hiding behind the living room sofa. When the ambulance arrived, paramedics discovered that Doreen still had a faint pulse and immediately rushed her to the hospital. Sadly, she could not be saved and passed away inside the ambulance. The unborn child also did not survive. Not only had the baby been violently removed from the womb, but the attacker had delivered multiple blows to the infant. Forensic experts later examined Doreen's body and determined she had been struck repeatedly with a long, sharp weapon resembling a machete or sword. Meanwhile, police combed through the house, which looked like the scene of a gruesome horror film. The brutality was so overwhelming that several officers later sought psychological counseling, unable to cope with the memories of what they had witnessed. Blood stained every surface, the floor, the walls, and even the ceiling. Despite a thorough search, investigators found no trace of the attacker or solid evidence inside the house. Outside, however, they noticed bloody footprints leading along the sidewalk before stopping in the middle of the road, suggesting the killer had entered a waiting vehicle. On the lawn, they uncovered another piece of evidence, a bloodied wolf mask. Charles insisted the mask did not belong to them, leading police to suspect it belonged to the murderer. The mask was collected and sent to the lab for testing. Detectives also turned to Diana, who was in deep shock but remained the only witness who might provide insight into what happened. She explained that not long after her father had left for the store, someone knocked at the door. When Doreen opened it, she was confronted by a man in a wolf mask holding a large blade. The masked figure told her, "I'm going to kill you now." Doreen immediately screamed for her daughter to run, and Diana darted to hide behind the sofa. The next thing she remembered was being found by her father. Because the attacker had kept the mask on, Diana was unable to give police a description of his face. At first, suspicion fell on Charles. Investigators noted that the murder occurred just minutes after he left the house, and they found it odd that his trip to the store coincided so precisely with the killer's arrival. When he returned, Charles stepped in blood multiple times and even slipped, becoming covered in it. Detectives considered whether he might have done this deliberately as a way to explain the bloodstains on his clothing. However, evidence soon began to undermine that theory. First, Charles's shoe prints did not match the bloody footprints that had been found outside. Second, it was clear the killer had escaped in a car parked on the street, yet no blood was found inside Charles's vehicle, nor did investigators discover any alternate pair of shoes that might link him to the prints. Police also interviewed the store clerk where Charles claimed he had gone, and the man confirmed he had sold candy to Charles that evening. Surveillance footage supported this, proving Charles was at the store during the time of the attack. With this, detectives set aside their suspicions of him and instead asked if he could think of anyone who might have wanted to harm his family. Without hesitation, Charles named Doreen's ex-husband, Michael. According to Charles, Michael had once kept up a civil relationship with his ex-wife, but things drastically changed after the death of their son, who drowned in the pool. Michael became convinced that Doreen had deliberately allowed the boy to die in order to sever ties with him completely. He even filed a civil lawsuit against her, trying to hold her legally responsible for their son's death, though he ultimately lost the case. Even during their marriage, Michael often displayed strange behavior. After Paul was born, he frequently slipped into depressive episodes and distanced himself from both Doreen and the child. Doreen believed much of this behavior stemmed from unresolved issues in his childhood. From an early age, Michael suffered from hearing problems and was forced to wear a large, conspicuous hearing aid. At the time, such devices were bulky, and he became a frequent target of mockery from other children. This constant ridicule deeply affected him, causing him to grow up withdrawn, isolated, and lacking close friends. He also struggled to connect with women, further shaping his solitary nature. Although Michael seemed to have left his struggles behind after meeting Doreen, he never truly overcame them. This became one of the main reasons for their divorce. Once Doreen married Charles, Michael grew bitter and resentful, especially hating the idea of another man raising his son. After Paul's death, these feelings turned into open hostility, and his resentment deepened into genuine hatred for his ex-wife. Around the same time, Michael also lost his long-term job, which only worsened his state of mind. With this background in hand, detectives decided to visit him. Charles's statement alone wasn't enough to make Michael the prime suspect, but since he lived only about 2 miles from Doreen's house, officers felt compelled to check on him immediately. Around midnight, they arrived at his residence and spotted his pickup truck near the garage. Flashing a light inside, they noticed what appeared to be blood on the steering wheel and keys. When they knocked at the door, there was no response at first. The house lights were on, and they could hear water running, raising suspicion that he might be washing away evidence or cleaning bloody clothes. After persistent knocking, Michael finally opened the door. He remained calm even after hearing about his ex-wife's brutal murder, answering questions casually, and even allowing police to enter without a warrant. Michael claimed he had gone shopping earlier in the day but had stayed home ever since. He willingly agreed to sign consent papers permitting a search of his house. As he reached for the pen, investigators noticed a deep cut on his right hand. He explained it as an accident while carving a Halloween pumpkin, but officers doubted the story. The wound looked fresh, and blood was still seeping from it. While some detectives questioned him, others searched the house. When one officer asked for his ID, Michael led him upstairs to the bedroom. There, he reached toward the headboard of the bed, prompting the officer to stop him. Suspicious of why he would keep documents there, the officer checked and discovered a holster with a loaded gun attached to the headboard. The weapon was seized, and Michael was taken back downstairs. Meanwhile, investigators found blood drops leading to the garage, where they uncovered a washing machine and a pile of stained clothes. That evidence was enough for an arrest, and Michael was taken into custody. Forensics teams soon began a detailed search of the house for additional proof linking him to the crime. While blood analysis would take several days, detectives uncovered other disturbing items. They found an empty box for a machete with an 18-inch blade, the same type later confirmed by medical experts to match the wounds on Doreen's body. They also discovered 2 makeshift coffins, leading investigators to suspect Michael had intended them for Doreen and Charles. In addition, body bags of the type used in hospitals were found, even though Michael had no legitimate reason to possess them. With mounting suspicions, detectives petitioned a judge for a warrant to hold him longer. However, the judge ruled that the evidence was circumstantial and ordered his release. Michael walked free. 3 days later, the lab delivered results. Blood samples from the crime scene revealed 2 distinct types. The majority matched Doreen's, while a smaller amount matched Michael's. This indicated he had injured himself during the attack. With this evidence, a judge quickly issued an arrest warrant, and Michael was formally charged with murdering his ex-wife and her unborn child. Additional testimony further connected him to the crime. Acquaintances told detectives that Michael owned a wolf mask identical to the one found near Doreen's house. He had even worn it to a Halloween party the previous year, and police obtained a photo of him wearing it. The same clothing from that photo was later recovered at his home. The mask became an important detail. To strengthen their case, police interviewed Doreen's neighbors, and several children reported seeing a man in a wolf mask standing across the street from her house at around 7 p.m., 2 hours before the attack. Michael's trial began in July 1988, nearly 4 years after the murder. At first, he pleaded guilty but later changed his plea, claiming diminished responsibility due to mental illness. A psychologist assigned to evaluate him confirmed that Michael suffered from severe psychological problems. He explained that Halloween itself had triggered his breakdown. Seeing children happily trick-or-treating reminded him of Paul's death and pushed him over the edge. Michael admitted that he went to Doreen's house that evening with a machete. When she opened the door, he told her, "You killed my son," and declared he intended to kill her. Doreen immediately recognized him despite the mask and shouted for Diana to run before Michael began his attack. He insisted he had not known about Doreen's pregnancy, though this claim was widely doubted. Standing at just 4 feet 11 inches, Doreen's pregnancy was obvious to everyone around her. Friends even joked that her belly made her appear wider than she was tall, making it nearly impossible for Michael not to notice. The prosecution maintained that Michael had been fully aware of his actions and had meticulously planned the murder in advance. During the investigation, detectives uncovered that he had spoken to friends about wanting to kill his ex-wife and her husband, then dump their bodies into the bay. The discovery of 2 coffins and body bags inside his house reinforced the theory that this was his original plan, though for unknown reasons, he abandoned it. Prosecutors suggested he may have panicked or feared remaining inside the home too long, worried about being caught. At trial, Doreen's daughter Diana also testified. At that time, she was 9 years old and still carried vivid memories of the night her mother was killed. Charles had not wanted his daughter to endure the trauma of reliving the event, but since she was the only eyewitness, her testimony was crucial. The trial stretched out for a full year, and ultimately Michael was convicted of murdering both Doreen and her unborn child. He was sentenced to death. However, before the punishment could be carried out, California placed a moratorium on executions. Because of this, Michael remains imprisoned to this day, with little chance of the death penalty being enforced anytime soon. Years later, Diana admitted that the memory of her mother's murder haunted her throughout her life, refusing to let her escape the nightmare. Eventually, she chose to forgive Michael, realizing that letting go was the only way to preserve her own sanity. If you found this case intriguing, make sure to like and subscribe. We upload new crime case videos every night. Stay tuned and brace yourself for what's coming next.